Have you ever really thought about where history comes from? Not just the events, but the actual physical books that tell us the story. Well, today we are digging into the incredible, almost unbelievable story of the great books of Islamic history. And believe me, it's a wild tale of genius scholars, world-changing technology, and a couple of catastrophic moments that literally shaped the world we live in today. Let's get into it.
So if you've ever looked into Islamic history, these are the heavy hitters. The works of scholars like Al-Tabari, Ibn Kathir, Ibn Khaldun, these are the bedrock. They're the primary sources that pretty much everyone, all around the world, relies on. For all intents and purposes, these books are the history.
Okay, but that just begs the question, right? If these books are the source for us, what was their source? I mean, where did these legendary scholars get all their information? And here's where it gets really mysterious. What happened to the books that came before them? Why did so many of the earliest histories just vanish? That's the puzzle we're putting together today.
All right, so to find the answer, we've got to rewind all the way back to the beginning. In the first few decades after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, nobody really felt the need to write history down. And why would they? The eyewitnesses, the companions, the Sahaba, they were still alive. History wasn't some story in a book. It was a living, breathing thing you could just go and ask about.
But you know, time passes. And as that first generation started to pass away, a real cultural crisis started to pop up. A new generation of young people, well, they were starting to forget the foundational stories. They were getting more impressed by the old heroes of the Roman and Persian empires, guys like Hercules and Rustum, than their own heroes, like the incredible Khalid ibn al-Walid. It was this urgent feeling that they had to preserve their own history before it just faded away completely.
So the caliph at the time, Umar bin Abdul Aziz, knew he had to act. He commissioned this brilliant scholar, Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, and gave him a mission: travel, collect all the stories from the last living companions, and compile them. And al-Zuhri did it. He wrote the very first comprehensive book of Islamic history. But then, disaster. The caliph was assassinated, and within just 30 years, the entire Umayyad Caliphate collapsed. In all that chaos, that first, priceless history book, the one and only copy, was lost. Forever.
Okay, so after the Umayyads, a new power rises, the Abbasid Caliphate. Now, the Abbasids had their issues, for sure, but they had one undeniable, all-consuming passion: knowledge. They built a brand new capital, Baghdad, and right in the heart of it, the legendary Beit al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom. It was the greatest library the world had ever seen. But to really fuel this massive ambition, they needed a technological breakthrough.
You see, the whole reason al-Zuhri's book was so easy to lose was because it was written on papyrus. And papyrus was, well, it was terrible for this sort of thing. It was fragile, ridiculously expensive, and a real pain to make. You couldn't exactly mass-produce a civilization's worth of knowledge on it. To really kickstart a golden age of learning, they needed a better medium. They needed paper.
And the story of how they got it is just wild. It's straight out of a movie. See, papermaking was a top state secret in China, guarded very closely. But after a huge battle, the Abbasid army captured thousands of Chinese soldiers. And wouldn't you know it, among them were artisans who knew the secret. That knowledge got transferred to Baghdad, and the great Caliph Harun al-Rashid, who instantly saw its power, built a massive paper mill right next to the House of Wisdom. This changed everything.
And boom, the second that cheap, durable, mass-produced paper hit the scene, an intellectual explosion went off. This was the real start of the Islamic Golden Age. All of a sudden, knowledge could be copied, shared, and preserved on a scale that was totally unimaginable before. For the first time, it felt like knowledge could actually be permanent.
And this quote right here, it just perfectly captures the kind of culture that paper created. Knowledge became the ultimate social currency. Scholars weren't just, respected, they were absolute celebrities. The source material puts it this way: they were held in the same high esteem as a Cristiano Ronaldo or a Lionel Messi is today. I mean, can you even imagine that? And it's all thanks to paper that this era gave us these legends whose amazing works we still have. You've got Ibn Hisham, who wrote the oldest biography of the Prophet that we have today, Al-Tabari, who wrote his giant universal history. Ibn Asakir's histories actually inspired Salahuddin. And Ibn Athar, he literally fought alongside Salahuddin and wrote the history of his time. Their work survived because it could be copied and spread far and wide. But you know how these stories go. Golden ages don't last forever. Over time, the Abbasid Caliphate, it got weak. It got corrupt, fractured. And from the east, a new, absolutely terrifying threat was on its way.
The crazy thing is, the rot on the inside was just as dangerous as the threat from the outside. The historical sources tell this really striking story. As Hulagu Khan's unstoppable Mongol army was marching towards Baghdad, what were the great minds inside the city doing? Reportedly, they were busy with these totally pointless debates, arguing about things like how many angels could dance on the head of a pin. They were completely and utterly distracted.
And in 1258, the inevitable happened. The Mongols sacked Baghdad. They just laid waste to the entire city. And in one final, brutal, symbolic act, they destroyed the House of Wisdom. They threw so many books into the Tigris River that the chroniclers of the time said the water ran red with the blood of the scholars, and then it ran black with the ink from their life's work.
The scale of the loss is it's hard to even comprehend. In one catastrophic event, 400 years of accumulated knowledge in science, philosophy, history, medicine was just wiped out. The intellectual heart of the world was gone.
Now, you'd think that would be the end of the story, but it's not quite. Even after all that devastation, the flame of knowledge wasn't totally snuffed out. Great scholars like Ibn Kathir and the incredible Ibn Khaldun, they emerged from those ashes. But just as the Muslim world was trying to get back on its feet, a new technological revolution was kicking off somewhere else. And this time, the story was going to be very, very different. You know, history has this really strange, almost poetic sense of timing. The very same year that Ibn Khaldun, who many called the last great universal scholar of the Muslim world, died, a man named Johannes Gutenberg was born in Germany, and he would go on to invent the printing press, and in doing so, change the entire world forever. But here is the final, tragic twist in the story. When this incredible new technology arrived, the new superpower of the Muslim world, the Ottoman Empire, rejected it. Now, the reasons were complicated. Some argued that true, sacred knowledge could only be copied by a human hand, not a machine. Others just declared it a forbidden Christian invention. And you also had a lot of established scribes and scholars who were afraid that mass-produced books would basically make them irrelevant.
And the consequences of this decision, just look at the math. It's absolutely brutal. A really skilled scribe could maybe, on a good day, copy 40 pages. A basic printing press? It could crank out 4,000. This wasn't just a small gap, it was an exponential leap forward in the ability to create and spread information.
The result is, well, it's about as stark as you can get. By the 1500s, Europe had over 1,000 printing presses just churning out books left and right. The entire Muslim world, it had zero. A civilization that had once led the entire planet in knowledge production, all thanks to embracing paper, was now choosing to sit out the next great information revolution.
And for nearly 300 years, this ban on the printing press stayed in place. And in that time, Europe went through the Renaissance, the Reformation, the Scientific Revolution. Universities popped up everywhere. Minds like Galileo, Newton, and Da Vinci came onto the scene. And the intellectual gap between the two worlds just grew into this massive, unbridgeable chasm.
And that really brings us to our final thought. This whole story shows how embracing a technology, like paper, can literally create a golden age, and how rejecting another one, like the printing press, can lead to centuries of falling behind. It leaves us with a pretty critical question for our own time. What's the printing press of our generation? Which world-changing technology are we, right now, overlooking, or fearing, or resisting?